Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update video. So this one is going to be about the on YouTube upcoming episode of the Braving the Elements podcast, but if you follow the podcast you know that obviously the YouTube kind of premieres of the episodes is always after the actual release of the episode, and that is always after the people who have the premium get access to the episode early. So the big thing here is that people are seeing the premiere, which is currently happening in like 11 hours. So it's happening right in the middle of the morning, my time, but it'll be like sort of like nighttime in America, basically, is the idea. So they have this podcast. They're titling it Avatar Creator on Aang's Design Evolution, plus hints at new movie. Now, straight away, this is a bit clickbaity, because yes, there is a comment from Bryan at the end of this podcast that alludes to a new project. It does not mention that it is a movie, the movie, and it's barely really a hint. It is a interesting comment because we have rarely, if ever, seen anything about a project that is not the first movie, and this would seem to be the first time something is actually being said about something else, but it's not super clear. I'll also again highlight this because I think this happened the last time this happened. The YouTube version of the podcast is a lot more clickbaity than the actual podcast description of the episode. So you can see here, this is just Bryan Konietzko drops in to talk about the design of some of our favorite characters. They go into some insider information about what choices went into it and all this sort of stuff. And they don't highlight the tiny comment at the end as being like an important part of the episode, because it is just a comment right at the end as just a minor tidbit relating to character design. So I would say it's an interesting enough podcast. It's like just under an hour long. It's interesting if you like the character design stuff. So it's interesting in that sense because, of course, Bryan is the character design guy, so that makes a lot of sense. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to play the clip of the actual kind of news here, where I think this line in the description is actually coming from, in the title on YouTube is coming from. So right towards the end, you can see here we're at like 55 minutes on the podcast here, and it's a somewhat lengthy clip, but like Janet and Dante kind of join in at a few times. But here's what the clip is.
Well, I can't obviously give any specifics, but I can just say the thing that I have personally been working on the past several months.
Yes.
Has been very heavily involved in character design, and it's a new direction for the Avatar verse. And I didn't originate it. There was an artist I was a fan of, and we contacted, and the first drawings that he puts out, I was like, that's it. And
wow.
I got chills.
And the heads are quite large. But
quite large heads!
Here.
Large by
those large heads.
Large by Avatar standards.
Large by Avatar standards, okay.
Yeah, I'm so excited about this style. It's not my style, but it is one that I just cannot wait to inhabit.
Oh my God. Okay,
so
well, there's going to be so much to talk about when it's all out in the world, and we can do that. Until then, Bryan, yes, one of our two dads, thank you so much for doing great.
And then they basically end the podcast. So that's it. That's it. That's why they're saying there's a hint at a new movie. And the hint is, obviously, like he says, there's no mention of it being a movie. And given that we know Avatar Studios is working on multiple projects, earlier on in the podcast, he again said that they're working on multiple projects. He mentioned, basically having to interact with artists who are working on different projects. No details beyond multiple projects. But then he gets to this project, which is the one he's currently been working on. Again, I don't think we know exactly when this was recorded, but based on more recent podcasts, I think it's, maybe like 4 months ago or something like that is probably in line with where this actually is. And obviously, if he's talking about over the last couple of months only doing character design, very clearly that should not be in relation to the first movie, because the first movie should be an animation, and it should be well past the character design stage, of course. So we're talking about one of the other projects here. Now, it could be one of the other movies, but he says it's a different direction for the Avatar verse. Now, does he mean that in a character design sense or in a story sense? We're not really sure. Or does he mean that the format of what that project is something different? Like, is it a mini-series? Does it have like a different art style than we're kind of used to? Because again, this is sort of the intent of sort of more of these Avatar projects, is that we're expecting the movies to be very kind of classic Avatar style. Maybe even some of the main series to be like that. But some of the other smaller projects that they're going to be doing will be maybe a little bit more experimental. And so you can see here, they brought in a artist that they were interested in, and basically had this artist kind of do some of the initial kind of concept stuff. So Bryan is involved in character design in I suppose like overview, I guess, but it's other people kind of doing the kind of design work, and he's more of oversight on it, is sort of the idea there. So that's interesting to know that, okay, there's going to be a project that is a little bit different than maybe we're used to. But again, we don't know what project this is. Is this project 2, 3, 4? Is it a movie? Is it a show? Is it short form content? Is it a spin-off miniseries type thing? What audience is it for? We don't really know. That's the big thing here with how vague it is. Now, about the head size comment, this is more of a kind of in-joke over the course of the entire podcast, which again is about character design. And one of the big points that gets discussed on this podcast is effectively the evolution of Avatar character concept stuff, which is that Bryan looks back on ATLA specifically and feels that he's not super happy with the fact that he feels the character designs have larger heads than he would like. And he straight away says that in Korra, this was something he was very strict on. He didn't want that same kind of larger head style. So if you look at it, it's more of a subtle thing, but obviously for him, who is heavily involved in it, it's this huge thing of like the characters' heads are huge, but it's actually more of a kind of subtle thing overall. So he's maybe suggesting here that because other people are doing the kind of bulk, I suppose, of the character design work, and they're maybe going for a slightly different style, this one actually has a little bit more of that kind of bigger head style that's maybe more reminiscent of ATLA, and getting into that style of things, because he says they clarify that it's like large in comparison to like Avatar, so that maybe means it's maybe just a little bit more noticeable than even ATLA was. So that's going to be interesting. And again, you have to keep in mind, we don't know what the actual like style is necessarily going to be for some of these projects, so it's not the most kind of clear thing in the world overall. So yeah, just to highlight here, this podcast and the hope for news is that's it. That's basically it. There's no real other subtle mentions of movies or anything else that's being worked on. Even the fact that like he starts this by saying, well, I can't talk about specifics, and if you've seen them on other Brave and the Elements podcasts, you know they go into these very clearly knowing what to do and what not to do. It's an official Nickelodeon podcast. They are not going to let information that they don't want out there slip out. That even if something was said on one of these podcast recordings, it would be cut out, I'm assuming, of the final recording. So Bryan obviously was very careful here to not even say anything like at all. So that's the kind of important thing here. He can mention like, hey, I'm working on a thing and it's interesting to me. And obviously he's excited about it, and that's quite interesting, and it obviously highlights that Bryan likes doing very kind of different things, that like he probably enjoyed working on like the movie to a certain degree, but at the same time it's like the characters he knows like super well, and might be fun designing them as older characters, but the new stuff and like a new style, that maybe kind of get that art aspect of him really kind of excited. So that's the main kind of idea about what's going on here. So absolutely, if you want to check out the podcast, I'll leave a link to the the podcast feed here. So if you don't want to wait for the YouTube version, you can just listen to the audio version like I did. Like I said, it's a pretty enjoyable podcast overall. Well worth checking out, because it's not just like a creator talking broadly about Avatar. It's talking about his specific area of expertise on the franchise that he helped to create. So it's interesting in that sense. But yeah, we're still waiting for bigger news, of course, but that's what was on this one. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on this. What project do you think he was talking about? Was it a movie? Was it a show? What are you expecting from this one? If you can even speculate at all about it, given that there's not much actually there. But yes, that's been the discussion here. But thanks for watching, and bye.